Okay, welcome back, everyone. I hope that was a bit of fun and you were able to think about that. I'm going to share some things now. I'm going to share two passages of scripture and talk about them. And I'm going to share a quotation from John Wesley as well, which comes from his Rules for the Society that was published in 1743. So a little before my time, but very good. Anyway, let me share the screen, and here we come. So here we are. Good. Rooted, this is number 5 in the series. We're strengthening fellowship tonight, at least we're thinking about it. And here's the passage. Actually, you're going to say to me, but Howard, we had this last week. And indeed we did. But it's a really interesting passage at the end of Acts chapter 2, because it tells us so many things. Of course, if you go to the beginning of Acts chapter 2, it talks about the disciples are together in the same place. So they are at one with each other. It's not just about geography. It's also about what is happening between them and the commitment that they have to each other. Anyway, at the end of the chapter, we read this. Now, as I read it, just think, what is it that this tells us about fellowship? So I'll read it slowly. This is the Good News Bible version. They spent their time in learning from the apostles, taking part in the fellowship, and sharing in the fellowship meals and the prayers. Day after day, they met as a group in the temple, and they had their meals together in their homes, eating with glad and humble hearts, praising God and enjoying the goodwill of all the people. Now, I wonder what it was that struck you as we went through it about fellowship. Well, I'm going to just take you through this and spend a little time talking about what struck me as I read and read it. So here's the first thing they do. They're learning. And it's interesting that fellowship is not just about cups of tea and that kind of sharing. It's also about learning from the apostles, from our leaders, from each other. And that process of learning needs to continue. It's a continuum, and it needs to be there all our Christian lives, all our lives altogether. And that the learning in that sense from the apostles. I think that reading the scriptures, obviously, but reading more widely, learning as we go along is really important. The other thing is, you'll see that as we go through this, it'll keep highlighting certain words that we look at, but taking part. You know, if you go to a football match, there's 22 people who are the players, the referee and the linesman. So I guess that's 25. And then there's how many thousand on the terraces? And sometimes church just feel a bit like that there's a few people who are doing everything, and on the, as it were, terraces of the congregation, there's an awful lot of people who are offering their advice about how it can be done. And I found myself in those kind of situations, and I think I want to turn the illustration round to say, well, actually, the real work is doing on the terraces. You know, let's get people involved in this, taking part in the life of the church, which is not just about doing a job. Can you be teaching in the Sunday school? Can you be a church steward? Can you be the treasurer? Can you do this? Can you do that? Can you be a welcomer? But actually, taking some part ourselves is a really good way of learning, of sharing, of being part of the community, of getting to know people. That's the best way, actually. So taking part and sharing in. So it's about not just learning about other people or other things or good information, but actually I share something of me in this. I open myself up. It's a bit scary sometimes, to share what is actually happening in my life and my thinking. And that sharing we can feel very vulnerable sometimes, but that vulnerability can be good because it helps other people also to feel that they can be vulnerable, and we can have a sharing which is really mutually helpful. And so, yes, doing jobs and taking part, but actually sharing the real me with others is also an important part of this. And they're doing it. They're meeting day after day now. Well, I don't suppose we're all going to travel up to the Central Hall or our local church every single day. Although for some people it might feel like that. But actually, that sense of regular fellowship. You know, when I was young, to say that you were regular at church meant that you went at least once a Sunday, and preferably twice. Today, regular attendance at church is measured by people turning up twice in a month. Now, I think that's, well, anyway, that's the way it's measured. Now, the best way is for us to be regular in our meeting and our sharing, so that our taking part really begins to mean something. And what's intriguing about the ministry of Jesus is the number of times that he's at a party, that he's sharing with people, that he's presiding at a meal, that he's being invited to meetings and parties. Why is that? Well, because meals are really important places where we can do that sharing, where in the context of a shared simple meal, we're able to do that. You know, at the Central Hall, I think it's so significant, the ministry of the cup of tea and cake after the 11 o'clock service. I mean, not only because I'm gasping for a cup of tea at the end of a service when I'm preaching, but also because around the tables, there's that fellowship, that's the word, that meeting of people, that sharing, that getting to know people and so forth, that the sharing, even a simple meal like a cup of tea and a cake, but also times of celebration. I know at Christmas you had a great meal at the Central Hall, and wherever you're coming from in terms of this material when you're watching it, I guess in your place of worship also there are times of celebration, times to be able to eat together and share together. I think it's so fundamentally important. I meet, for instance, I meet every Tuesday with the ministers of our city here in Winchester for 3 Tuesday mornings for half an hour. we meet on Zoom for a prayer meeting, sharing and prayer. But once a month, we meet at a local church in the centre of the city and pray for 45 minutes or more. And then we go and have breakfast together. Do you know, that simple thing has really cemented the collegiality, the fellowship of the church leaders in this city. So meals together. And praising God. Just meeting and being together in worship. I mean, this is going back to what we were talking about last week. Praising God, and the fellowship meal about communion and the prayers that we share together, the prayer meetings that I know we have, that they become fundamentally important in our learning and our sharing, learning about each other and sharing of ourselves. Now, the text here says that they enjoy the goodwill of all the people. And that's a wonderful thing when a local church is seen as being a really effective part of the community. And that's to do with the work that they do, their commitment to the community, their standing for justice, their care of creation, their serving the community. And when all of that happens and the goodwill of the people, then actually that creates a really important missional opportunity for people. And how does that come about? Well, for all kinds of reasons that I've just described, but it happens when the Christian community, you know, we have the privilege of being the people of Jesus. And when we carry that with glad and humble hearts, I think that's such a significant phrase here in these verses, because that tells us something about the inner attitude of the people who are there. Now, just have a look at all that. What is it that you take from that? Let me just, oh, no, let me go back. Oh, no. Just have a look at that. What from that text, what are the key words that you take? You might just want to jot them down because we'll be sharing, but in any case, think about them. And the way that we think about fellowship and the way that we are as the people of God as we share our lives together. Okay, just a minute to think about that. And then here's another passage, Ephesians 4. Well, it's not all of 1 to 6, but that passage, Ephesians 4, 1 to 6, is such a wonderful passage. Paul, talking to these Ephesian Christians, he'd spent 2 years with them ministering in Ephesus, and he knew so much about them. So his epistle to his friends in Ephesus is a really intriguing epistle with things that are so important in the life of the church. Just the way he starts in chapter 1 about what God has done for us, and then he goes on to what God has done for us individually. And by the time he gets to Ephesians 4, he's wanted to talk about the whole community. And he starts this part of his letter with this lovely phrase, lead a life worthy. And, you know, without that, there's no point in Christian mission. If in fact our lives don't advertise the very gospel that we say we believe in, what's the point? And that ought to be true too of our Christian communities. Now, I know they're not all perfect, but we ought to be challenging each other and reminding each other that actually individually and together, we need to be leading a life worthy of the very gospel that we say we believe in. And how do we do that? And what implication is that for fellowship? Well, how about humility? It's easy, isn't it, sometimes to talk about the great things and the and to be so full of ourselves. But it's really interesting that so many times in the New Testament, there's this sense of being aware that whilst we may have gifts and graces that are wonderful,